So today we're just going to make a really quick and simple to the point video. So naturally, maybe wondering what that point may be. This is something that I thought was probably common knowledge, but I guess apparently not. So I'm going to go ahead and really kind of get to the point here. If you didn't already know, when you get to feather level 80, you're going to see that you go from like this little 90-ish thousand to all of a sudden you're going up by like 1,000% every level. Where like here you're only going up, maybe a little bit at a time for a lot more cost. Notice that, here I'm going up from 3,200 to 6,300, and here I'm only going up 2,600. The reasoning for this, in case you were wondering, is if you look at the handbook, you got 1, 2, and then you go to 3. So what you got to do is get your feather level up to 80 to really get yourself all that extra added bonus on your back accessory. And when you do that, then you get into that weird quasi-large, big time number realm when it comes in regards to Legend of Mushroom. Now, of course, I always tell you guys this, but check the description down below if you'd like to save some money playing Legend of Mushroom. You can download the game over at Aptoid and use the AppCoin wallet, or the Aptoid wallet for that matter. And basically, you can save 5% with Dakanoth as the code. So, if you didn't already know that, make sure to check that out. But one of the things that I mean, obviously we've had this rabid avian release, and it's been interesting because you can't really breed them with any other avians, so you got to kind of keep them mixed in between. So far, this is like the best I've got, which I thought, okay, well, just for fun for this video, let's also take a look and see what exactly Dream Moment's like. So I'm going to go ahead, we're just going to max him out, I'll deploy him, and we'll just try him out and see exactly how well does he work out in practical use. Now, being that he is at level 35 right now, that means I'm getting 192, 240 there, and some damage resistance, which is fine, right? But the curiosity is that shield going to be worth its weight in gold? Because again, you gain 6% of a max HP every 12 seconds, and they last for 6 seconds. Now, as you may already know, you've also got like the Mushroom Burglar, for example. You can take that guy out, all right? And there are certain avians in the game that'll increase the duration of a shield. Like, for example, you can get the Bee-Duck from the Bee-Duck event if you were around. And you can add to your shield's length of time. You can even, if you wanted to, you can even poke around with like different abilities. But let's just say for argument, right? You could also probably grab like Puppy Fervor, for example, which is going to increase the shield effects by 20%. And then, okay, say you do that, right? So you get rid of the deer, you throw Puppy Fervor in, and then maybe on your actual skills, maybe you decide that, okay, I'll keep Blade Pierce, I'll keep my stuns, but maybe instead of disarming them, I'll throw a shield in, or something along those lines, right? Now, doing something like this and then jumping into PvP, we're going to see kind of just how well does that actually work in practice. Because again, by popping a shield and having a shield that also kicks off, you also have to survive for that length of time for that shield to even fire off. And that's the only trouble, is you won't very rarely find yourself in that situation if you're going to get blitzed to death. So this is only really useful if you're going to live long enough for it to actually be of any use. Now, granted, you can see that a lot of the builds that are blitz-based don't really have the advantage of it, they don't have Cheetah Zero, so it very rarely ever actually ends up going haywire on me. Like, I can go through and blitz through so many. I mean, it is so easily done when you outshoot a zero that it just kind of makes everything else seem like a wash. Now, as you can tell, it's ridiculous. I can rank through this without any trouble at all, even though I should have lost every time. And now, like, even here, this might be the one time where I'm actually going to lose. Maybe. Yeah, and it's just a timing thing more than anything. And it's not even the basis behind what a lot of these builds are designed to do. Now, I'm not going to say that, You know, I haven't run into like a few different builds where they're designed really like in part like here, this is cheetah on cheetah. And the only reason why I win there is just because I nailed him faster than he could nail me. And that's really all there is to it. Um, but even then, right? If it's the basis behind your build, that often you can see eventually does kind of come to a grinding halt at some point, and you can only go so far before eventually it becomes apparent that that just isn't going to work. So a lot of the time, I find that whenever you use somebody like Dream Moment, he's not going to be used in PvP, really. I mean, unless you've got a really heavy tank build where you have a stupid amount of defense and HP, that might be where you see it get used. Like here, it's, yeah, this could potentially run into the 12-second deadline, maybe. Yeah, but even that wasn't enough. Now, granted, we're at number 4, so I don't know. We might get lucky and we may get near top 2, top 3 for Arena Battle today. I don't know. See, like that's cheetah on cheetah. So I lose and I don't have any more results. So that is what it is. But of course, I always grab the empowerment gears, the awakening scrolls, and then always picking up your awakening crystal. I, for one, only pick those up and then I'll grab whatever I can extra, like soul crystals. I'll eventually, yeah, it's like to me, fertilizers, dime a dozen. It's not really that big of a deal. And now I have yet to do this, but I'm going to start doing it now. Is grab the pack coupons, just out of necessity, because I feel like having them is better than not. Now, like here, crit rate and combo. Oh yeah, we're totally going to grab that over the regen in a heartbeat. Now, yes, we're going to sacrifice a little bit of crit rate, but that's totally worth it in the grand scheme of things, because now we're talking nearly 10% there, which I can now take away and move over into crit rate. And you'll notice that that balances that out a little better, but now we've got a high enough crit rate and combo that it's going to be that much better. Of course, we're also going to go ahead and do a quick empower. We're in like the mid 80s in there, so it's really not doing that bad. Of course, we can always grab our acquisitions here and go, yeah, this is what I'm running on souls right now, which this is still by far one of the best combinations that I've come up with. The nice thing is that eventually you can, so if you wanted to, they'll eventually have soul swaps. That is to say, you can actually, instead of having to go in here and like hit reset on these every single time, you'll eventually be able to go in there and actually change them out and swap them around, which is going to be really nice when we actually get around to having access to that. But I would say the more practical use for like somebody like Dream Moment, really. And I think still, you know, a 20-second increase to your shield effects, while it's handy, I mean, if you look at what your actual avian's going to do, it's still not really going to change anything in that realm. And so for that reason, we're just not going to bother with trying to mess with shield durations. Now, I will say that you can look at like using the rabbits coming, for example, and you can use that in tandem with like, so for example, let's say I throw him in and I throw in the tipsy snail. The only time where that actually comes into play here is if you have something like the Cryoshield Flame, which basically makes a lot of its damage based on really the movement speed that it can target, because every 10% of the movement speed lowers their chance of frostbite by 1.5%. You know, so if they're really slow, they'll eventually die really fast. But the more practical example of it being used, actually, if anything, is probably in the back accessory for the Frost Inspector, where you can deal damage equal to 3% of the current HP to all targets every 5 seconds, and then you reduce attack speed, regen, enemy regen speed, and attack speed for 12% for 3 seconds. And if the target's movement speed drops below 80, then it obviously scales depending on what that movement speed is. So if we were to say, you know, okay, we've got now Rabbids incoming, that's going to drop that by 15, and then we've also got Tipsy Snail that's going to drop it by 40. You know, you can, instead of using like Dazzled or even like well, you know, like you could probably leave a couple of these, but like you could, you know, potentially go in here and like adjust attack speed. We could take like the clone out, because in PvP it rarely comes into play. You can use it sure in like some other cases, but like here, slow the target by 5 seconds for the thorn ticket. Like if we do something like this and then we jump into PvP, it's gonna work a heck of a lot better. Now if, let's say for example, oh, I don't know, like I would say we're probably going to have to try this out in the Cloud Ascension trials, since that's just really the only other practical place where I could really see how this works. Again, all I pay attention to here is what are they focusing in on. So like this build here is a little wacky because it looks, I'd almost have to look closer at what he's got, because as you can tell, he doesn't have combo, he doesn't have counter-strike, and he doesn't have crit. So he's all regen, which is interesting, and I don't entirely know why. So I want to try him out and see what exactly is the method here, because it looks like what he's doing is a skill damage build, if I didn't know any better. And if that's the case, then it's gonna do some pretty wacky results. Because yeah, he's gonna do a stupid amount of skill damage. So he's actually the hidden gem in that group. Because mages are notorious for this, where they can really benefit from having a stupid amount of damage. And that's one of the the genius of being able to set up a build that way. Really, is being able to take advantage of your class's benefits and use them to your fullest extent. Nice thing about having a mage, though, is that they can pop shields with especially if they're a holy guide, for that matter, because the holy guide can actually pop shields. That's part of the reason why you very rarely ever see anybody run the actual alternative build, just because of the sheer difference that you get in that. But heck, even seeing how like that plays out, you can see how when you kick off like a yellow Frostland Spectre, you're getting the maximum amount of bonus you can possible. And that's really, really nice. And you're going to get pretty much all the extra added any bit pieces that you would need for it to really work in favor of what you would hope would be the most advantageous in terms of what you're ultimately aiming to achieve with the build anyway. But even here, like here, you can see that it's interesting now that we've also got, oh man, we've got like, that guy's got an interesting build, to say the least. That is actually really cool. Of course, I have a feeling I know who that is in my state. I'll have to kind of peer into how that build's set up, because from what we can tell, he's definitely increasing his active skill regen, he's increasing skill damage like wildfire, and he's using Crimson Moonfall, so a lot of his build is probably based in part to stacking skill damage as much as possible, which, I mean, that's cool and all, especially when you throw in, so we're, here I'm kind of focusing on combo and crit, trying to make, the most that I can in a Plume Monarch build. Your mage builds are a little different in the way they're designed for that reason, but it works out in the end. In any case, guys, hopefully you kind of get the idea of what you would want to build in terms of how you want to go about playing it. But that's part of the fun thing about artifacts in this game, is that it really does change the way you can play the game in such a major way. And even here, like, we're still not hurting any because we're using shields to kind of get by. But if, let's say, for example, now if we just like jumped out of here, if you wanted to take advantage of like what's going on right now, obviously you've got the packs, which I think that's obviously got its weight in gold. We're still waiting on the upgrade, and then there's like the wishing fountain. Obviously you got some chances at that. For those of you who are wondering, this is how my painting came out. It's just kind of cool. But yeah, most of this stuff we're waiting for it in 2 days time, so a lot of this stuff here will all kick off here in a couple of days. But in any case, that's the Frenzied Saga and all of the stuff that I have for you today. Thank you guys for watching.